working with bees?
Well, about 12 years ago, my husband, he was looking for a side hustle to make a little bit more money, or extra money, I guess, and a friend of his had bees. And he ran about 200 hives, and he was getting ready to go out of business. And the thing that interested my husband is that you do all of the moving of bees at night. So you can work your day job, and then at night when the bees need to be moved, you can do that at night. And it's not something you have to do every single day. It's something you can do on the weekends. So that's why he got interested in it, is because of the flexibility of the hours. You could do something during the day, and then you could do the bees at night and on the weekends.
Okay. When did you start working with the bees?
He was actually helping his friend and learning about bees. And it's so funny because when he grew up, he raised cattle. And when he started learning about the bees, he says, you know what? Raising or doing bees is a lot like raising cattle, because you need to feed them. You need to make sure they have water. You need to keep them healthy. And they give you a byproduct. So he started working with the bees through his friend about 12 years ago, and he saw the similarities, and he already had that cattle background, so it was really easy for him to transition into learning how to, take care of the bees as well.
Okay. Have you ever been stung by one of the bees? Or he?
Yes, my husband has been stung multiple times. And it is just something that goes with the job. I mean, they wear the protective gear, but somehow you just always manage to get stung. We like to try and keep calmer bees, different breeds of bees. Some are more calm and some are more aggressive. So we like the Italian queens because they tend to raise brood that is more calm. We also go out there with a smoker to smoke the bees, and that seems to calm them down a little bit, kind of makes them go into protective mode. So that keeps you from getting stung. But if we do have a hive that starts getting aggressive, it's probably because an outside queen came in and started laying, like a different breed of queen came in and started laying that brood that just was a little more aggressive. So yes, he gets stung, and we try to keep our bees as calm as possible just by the genetics that we use.
Okay. How many species of honeybees are there?
Ooh, good question. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I know that there are different breeds of honeybees. I know the Italian. Honestly, I only work with the Italian, so honestly, that would be something you would have to Google. My husband would probably know. I apologize.
It's okay. What is the process of how a bee creates a honeycomb?
How the bee creates the wax in the honeycomb? Yeah. Okay. So what happens is, you know how a spider draws its web? Mm-hmm. The bee creates the wax just the same exact way. So what the bee does, actually all the bees are female, the foragers are female. The bee goes out, she collects the pollen and the nectar, she brings it back to the hive, and the hive has to have enough energy in her body, she has to be fed enough, and the temperature has to be right for her to be able to produce the wax. And there's actually on the bottom of their belly, there's 8 little slits. And they are able to produce little flakes of wax through those little slits. And once that wax is produced, they take their legs, they bring it up to their mouth, and they chew it until it gets soft.
Oh, wow.
And then they start molding it into that hexagon shape that you see in the hive.
Oh, wow. Approximately how many bees live in a hive?
Ooh, there is a lot. I'm going to guess about, what was I? I had all these facts down when I was at the fair. What is on that paper? Did it say 50,000?
Wow.
There's a lot. I mean, it's like more than 1,000.
In one hive?
Yes. Mm-hmm. There's, in a box of frames, there's 10, or in a hive box, there's 10 frames. So front to back, that is all bees. And then when there's a lot of nectar, a big nectar flow, then we double box that. So there's 2 boxes, and then there's 20 frames on there. And all that queen can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day. And a bee actually lives for about a month during the nice weather. So if you can imagine, I mean, if she's laying 2,000 eggs a day, then
that's their lifespan, a month.
Only because, and during the wintertime, it is longer because they're not out foraging.
Okay.
But when it's nice and sunny and there's a big nectar flow, then they're constantly flying back and forth and back and forth.
Working.
And they don't die because they're old. They die because they wear their wings out. So their wings wear out and they're not able to go back to the hive. So that's why they have a shorter lifespan in the summer months, is because basically they just work themselves to death.
Okay. What species of bees does the ecosystem best benefit from?
What species of bees?
Like what I think what she's trying to ask is what type of breed benefits us the most, that benefits the ecosystem the most.
It's gonna be the honeybee. I know there's different breeds of honeybee, but they all do the same thing. So just like there's different genetics in people, there's different genetics in honeybees, but they all work together. So it's the bee who goes out and is the best pollinator. That's why the almond growers, they prefer the bee, the honeybee, instead of the bumblebee, because the honeybee actually will go back and forth and pollinate, or the bumblebee is not a good pollinator like that. Oh, I have something to add though. Okay, so there's other pollinators too, and I don't know much about them, but butterflies can be pollinators because they go from flower to flower. There's other insects that can be pollinators besides the butterfly, but it's the honeybee who's number 1 on that list because they do the most efficient job.
Okay. How much does the ecosystem benefit from bees?
If the bees weren't around, then Einstein says that the human race will be gone in about 4 years. And I do have a book. It's a really good book. What if there were no bees? So, it says, what would happen if bees became extinct? If there were no bees, the farmers near grasslands would have a lot of trouble growing the crops because the farmers need the bees, especially the honeybees, to help pollinate their fruit and their nut trees. Apple, cherry, plum, avocado would produce less fruit or no fruit at all without bees. And the almond and macadamia trees would produce less too. So if we don't have those bees, those fruit trees and those nut trees are going to produce either no fruit or less fruit, and that's going to be less fruit for us humans to eat. And if there were no bees to pollinate the flowers or the grasses, then the livestock, they would not have anything to eat. So that's why it's so important for those bees to be there, because they pollinate all these living things. And once there's no pollination, then those living things start to diminish. And then all those animals that depend on those plants, they're not going to have a food source. And so that's why it just starts slowly trickling down till we don't have anything to eat ourselves. Because if I should get a picture in here too. Okay. So, let's see. We have the bees and the toads. Let's see. Apparently toads eat bees. Okay, let's do the bears. I don't know how to explain this. The bees produce the food for these other animals, and then if there were no bears, and the fox wouldn't have anything to eat, and if there were no birds, then, or if there were no spiders, then the birds wouldn't have anything to eat. You know how that whole thing works. But this is a little diagram here to show how that all coincides. So.
Can we see that?
Oh yes, definitely. And if you want to go ahead and read through that book, that's perfectly fine. If you want to go ahead and read through the book now, I can bring in a box with some frames, and if you want to take a look at them.
Is that where you keep the bees?
No, the bees aren't in there. No, they're just empty.
No, but that's what
you
they
live in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like a chain reaction
Yeah.
effect. It's the red button. That's cool.
Supposed to talk.
It was paused.
Oh.
Okay, and this one's full of honey. So you could definitely eat off of this one because there's honey in it, and you would get some wax, which is perfectly fine. I mean, the wax is definitely not going to hurt you. In fact, some people, they specifically ask for the honey with a comb in it, but we don't sell that. They have to work a lot harder to make that wax. But if we give them a template like that, then they can build out that wax a little faster and start collecting all that nectar as a food source. And the reason that the bees make the honey is not really to give it to the humans, but is actually their food source. So you can actually feed that honey back to the bees during the winter months when there's not a lot of food out there.
Do you guys feed the bees?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have to in the winter. We have to keep them alive and healthy. So we do everything that we can to keep them happy. So this one has, it started putting honey right here in this one. Here's a good one. Okay, so that honey in the middle is ready, and then you see the nectar on the side that's not ready yet. Mm-hmm.
So once it's covered with this, it's ready.
Mm-hmm. Once it's covered like that, then we know that it's ready to extract. Now, we would never extract anything that's just full of nectar because that has a too high of a moisture content, and that will actually ferment in the honey. So you only want to extract stuff that's like this. So if we're going through a hive and we're extracting, and we see a frame like that's full of just nectar, then we'll, oh, like this, then we would skip over it. Even there's a little bit of honey down here, all this stuff is not ready yet. So we only pick the frames that look like that big heavy one that I showed you. Put it in the first one. Yeah, we only pick the frames that look like this. That's completely ready to be extracted. So let me go wash my hands. Do you need to wash your... How are your bees doing? Are you losing a lot of bees? And the truth is, we do. We actually had a pretty big hit this year because of mites. So between the pesticide sprays that our bees get, unfortunately, and the mites that come in and start to kill the bees, we do have a problem with that. But we just keep on checking and try and get them back healthy. Are there any more questions?
No.
Okay. Do you have any questions?